I'm going to talk about today is this cone of uncertainty. So we're going to really talk about how to save your small business, which really comes down to having cash for your company. So this cone of uncertainty, we've all seen this as a hurricane is approaching our shores, where from the very first day, we're starting to look at the path of this hurricane that's coming and bearing down. The eye of the storm is bearing down on a particular location. And the way that the cone of uncertainty works is they have a really good statistical probability of where the eye of the storm is going to hit tomorrow. But as you go day out and day out and day out, it becomes less and less certain. The probability of a direct hit of the eye of the storm to your location becomes less and less certain. So what we're trying to do with small businesses as we're navigating these economic times of distress that we're experiencing right now is to develop a cash forecast that will be very similar to the way that this cone of uncertainty shapes up. So we're going to unpack that illustration a little more here. So this is the illustration that we have. And on the right was that image that we had of this cone of uncertainty for a hurricane. And on the left side of this slide, we have this projection. This is just a fictitious illustration that's in the template that we provide to you, where you can plug in how much cash you have at the beginning of the year. And then we're going to show you some tools that feed into this table where we can pull in our cash inflows, which are sometimes income, but aren't always income and revenues. There's other kinds of cash inflows, expenses that we have, and some other cash outflows that we'll have, and along with some draw or debt payments that we might have. And we'll touch briefly on why those are different from income and expenses. So this is really the main sheet of the template that we have. And with this sheet, really, again, this is just an illustration. We're going to show you and encourage you how to put your own information into this sheet. But essentially, there's three main areas. There's the area at the top that has our revenue or cash inflows. There's the area in the middle that talks about our expenses and cash outflows. And then there's the area of the table down on the bottom that brings all this together and helps us see what our cash position is on a month-by-month basis. So the cash track template, what we're going to do is we're going to enter in our expected revenue details, other cash inflow details. We're going to build out our monthly expense budget, and there's a couple models that we'll use to do that. And then we're going to break out our payroll expenses. And we'll explain in a bit why payroll is treated a little differently in this model. We're going to start with the cash inflows, and mostly this has to do with our revenues. So I've just kind of broken out just the revenue section of this spreadsheet. And here's what we need to try and do. So first, we have to be creative at finding ways to generate revenue. So creative at finding new ways to generate revenue. So that's something all of us need to do, is really think about the products and services that we offer. How can we adapt those and to meet real customer needs that are out there? Then we need to expedite project completions. So this is different for, obviously there's different kinds of businesses that are going through this presentation. But if you are, for instance, a construction company, you're doing kitchen and bath remodels, or you're a web developer and you're building out custom websites for people, typically you're going to have an amount that's due only when you are finished and done with the job. So the harder you can work right now, but working harder to finish and build the projects, and then prioritizing projects that can yield cash faster. And this, what I mean by this might not be the largest job that you have in your pipeline right now. There might be some smaller jobs that are lower hanging fruit that you can finish up and get billed so you can have some cash coming in. So that's where it comes down to prioritizing projects that can yield cash faster. But your business might be in a scenario where if you were to just follow the standard timeline that you had promised that customer, it might be that you wouldn't finish that job for several weeks or even a couple months. But if you potentially, you and your team could buckle down, work 7 days a week, work longer hours, get this project done and build, that might give you the potential, in the example of this spreadsheet, where I have in May, for instance, a $12,000 collection that we would get paid for a project. If I can work really hard, I can get that thing completed and billed and paid in April. That might make a world of difference to our business. The second area of cash inflows that we have to pay close attention to is our payments and receivables. So first, we need to, this is obviously for companies that do some kind of invoicing or billing for projects, they need to expedite collections. So this means that we need to look at all of our receivables and look at the aging for those receivables, and every invoice that is past due, we need to call that customer, email that customer. I prefer to call them just in a nice, friendly way, ask them if there's an issue with getting this invoice paid, that it is due, and we're really hoping that they can send this in right away. So we call, email these past due clients. If you are doing work for a first-time client, especially a larger company, they almost always have a very specific vendor onboarding process. So the first time you invoice that big company, they're going to have some special things that they're going to need you to do. They're not going to pay you until you send them maybe a vendor form. Most likely they're not going to pay you until you send them a W-9. So first-time customers, you have to pay special attention to any invoicing requirements that they might have. Otherwise, that bill that you send them might just be sitting in someone's inbox waiting for you to call and find out what's going on. So we got to stay right on top of that. The second thing we can do is accept credit cards. So if you're doing larger jobs like I have in the illustration here, maybe you're billing $1,000, $5,000, $10,000 jobs. The idea of taking a credit card for that and giving up 3% in a processing fee can be very painful. And ordinarily, you maybe wouldn't, it's not something you'd want to do when you have plenty of cash. But if it comes down to having enough cash to keep your doors open and taking in that 3% haircut on the merchant fees for a credit card transaction, it's obviously a much better step for you to go ahead and take that credit card. If a customer's bill is starting to stretch out way past due, you might also consider taking a credit card, because that customer may never pay you, and it's better to transfer that risk to the credit card company than to you personally as a business owner. So double think your strategy for accepting credit cards in this time, and don't be shy about doing that if it means the difference of having enough cash to operate your business. And then the third thing is you may find yourself in a position where you have to negotiate and offer payment plans to customers. So there could be a bill that's out there and that customer had full intention of paying that bill, but they have been hit very hard. You might need to negotiate. You might need to take a haircut on that invoice in order to get it paid, or you might need to just offer them a payment plan. So it doesn't do you any good to tell them this $10,000 invoice has to be paid immediately if they're not even going to pay it immediately, or maybe they have no capacity to pay this at all. But maybe they could spread that out and pay $1,000 a month until it's paid off, and you could at least begin to get some cash flowing from that invoice and improve your odds of getting paid to completion. Talk about our cash inflows and loans and contributions. There's a couple considerations that we have to take in mind. The first is most of us as small business owners, we're paid as profit from the business. We don't actually take a W-2 salary. We are paid as a draw from the profits. Well, the opposite of that is every time you put money into the business. So when you do that, you're making an owner contribution. So if you've been fortunate that you've drawn profits out of your business for the last several years during good economic times, you might find yourself now in a position where you need to make an owner contribution to put some extra cash back into the business and invest in its survival. The other form of contribution will be a loan. So this isn't revenue. It's a way of financing. So the PPP loan or the EIDL loan will be an example of a loan that you might be able to get right now, and we're going to plug that in here as a cash inflow. The one thing I would like to note is to beware of different kinds of merchant financing. So as small business owners, we see these ads in our social media feeds, emails, everywhere we turn, we're being inundated with these offers to get, $5, $10, $50, or $100,000 very quickly. And we just have to be very careful about the terms and conditions of some of that loan. It comes at a very high price, and they may have the ability to sweep your checking account if you fall awry of one of their loan terms. And if that's the case, you could find yourself waking up one morning and have no money whatsoever in your account. And all the work that you do into your cash projection and your entire business is going to be for nothing because you'll be completely broken out of business. So just want to be extra careful of these different forms of financing that you have right now. Most of our cash outflows, though, that we're going to focus on are going to hit these three main areas. So there's our budgeted monthly expenses, our payroll, project or one-time expenses, owner draws, and debt and principal payments, including credit card balance. So we're going to just kind of focus in on some of these outflows. First template that we have here is just a very simple monthly budget. So all this is you can basically plug in all of the different expenses that your business has. This is a little easier to do if you go into your financial software like QuickBooks, and you can dump out everything that you spent money on last year or in the last 12 months. And so you have a decent starting point of how much you're spending money on. And then you can go through each line and ask yourself some questions about how you might be able to cut back or eliminate some of those expenses. Or in certain cases, you might have to figure more money for those line items. This template will just make a monthly average of those, and then it totals up your monthly expenses down at the bottom, which gets carried over to the expense sheet. The thing that I like to do, though, is pull out of these monthly expenses things that are one-time expenses or maybe aren't falling very evenly month to month. They maybe are expenses that are really hit you harder in certain months. Those I prefer to break out on a month-to-month basis. So if you have a lot of things like that, then this simple budget worksheet probably isn't the right tool for you. The better tool would be to break out your expenses completely month by month like we have in this illustration. And this is actually a lot easier to get together than you might think, because if you have financial software like QuickBooks, you can simply go in and look at the last 12 months or last year and export out your income statement. And when you run your income statement, first of all, be sure that you're running it on a cash basis, not an accrual basis. And second, make sure you just set it to show the data by months, and it will break out all the data exactly like this. You can just export out as a spreadsheet and put it right into the cash projection template that we have. And then you can go line by line and take a closer look at each of these expenses. And again, you can notice I've just highlighted in yellow that I've taken payroll out of this formula. So here's what we need to do as business owners is go line by line through every single thing that we spend money on and ask some questions, some real hard questions. So I'm talking about looking at every single bill that you get, every single credit card statement, every single thing, and ask yourself these questions. What can be cut? What can be eliminated? I'm not sure about you, but I like to sign up for different subscription services that I might use. I might try them out for a little while, and it could be that maybe I'm not really using some of these things as much as I thought I was going to use, and I can actually cut and eliminate those and get rid of those expenses. What can be reduced? Maybe there is a service that you have that's important to your business, but you can kind of cut that back right now, especially if your business is slowed down. So what can you reduce? And what can be paused? So we see certain businesses right now that are completely closed, and they have marketing programs that are trying to drive foot traffic to their business. Well, it's not very good use of money right now. So can those marketing programs just be put on pause so that advertising spend can just be redeployed if in a month or two when things are starting to get back to normal and that marketing investment makes more sense? There could be a lot of services like that you might be able to just pause right now. And then lastly, what can be delayed? So potentially new projects that you're going to start, any new expense that you were going to incur. Do you have to do that right now? Can you wait a month or 2 or 3 months and push that out into the future? So those are the things that you're going to do with all the money that you have yet to spend. Now we have to focus in on things that we already are getting bills for, that we've already agreed to do, or work that we have in process right now where we have already committed to doing a job or a project and that we're going to eventually get a bill. What can we do to push out some of these cash outflows for our business? So the first thing we might need to do is ask vendor for a payment plan. So if you have a particular large bill that's coming due, you're not going to really have cash to pay for it, will they work out some kind of a payment plan for you? It's better to work with your vendor, get out ahead of this a little bit, and be proactive and ask for that sooner rather than later, rather than just ignore the bills completely and ruin the relationship that you have with your key vendors. Can you pay that bill with a credit card or some other form of financing so that you can, again, spread out those payments over a longer term instead of asking your vendor to bear the brunt of that? Maybe you're financing that with a credit card or some other type of a mechanism. And the last thing I like to say when it comes to paying your vendors and work that you've already committed to do is make sure that you're prioritizing payments to your strategic vendors. If you ultimately decide that there just isn't money to pay all of your bills in a timely fashion, take a long, hard look at those vendors that are really strategic to your business. If you use 1099 employees or you have other vendors that are just really critical and suppliers for your business, you clearly need to prioritize payments to those over other vendors. So just taking a long, hard look at that. Payroll. So many businesses do their payroll on a biweekly, every 2-week basis. Well, when that happens, there are 2 months during the year where you will actually have 3 payroll periods. It just works out that way. So that's the reason why I like to break out payroll. It's one of the reasons why I like to break out payroll. The other reason why I like to break out payroll is that if you are going to have to make some tough choices on furloughing or laying off employees, when you have the payroll broken out like I have on the payroll sheet, you can see very easily how that is going to impact your cash position, as this unfolds. So so that's why I like to break this out. The one thing that I will note is that if you are an owner, of a small business, an LLC or a sole proprietor, you're probably not paid as a W-2 employee. Your wage is actually not included in this payroll. That's an owner's draw. And again, you may be able to make an adjustment to your draw to take a little less money right now than you have been in the past. The last thing I like to say about payroll, which can be a little tricky, is depending on your payroll provider, some payroll providers, especially the really big companies, when they run your payroll, they will take out the gross payroll and the employer payroll taxes all at once when they run your payroll. So the money that they've taken is to do the net pay that is going to go in your employees' paychecks. They're taking out all the withholdings of federal income taxes, Social Security, Medicare, local taxes that the employee is paying, and they're taking out all the payroll taxes that you as the employer pay. So they take all that money out, and then they will potentially sit on that money, and they enjoy the benefit of the use of that money until it needs to be sent into the government, which is typically on a quarterly basis. So depending on when that payroll period is, there could be really up to several months of use of that money that they are going to be able to use that you will not have that money to use. On the other hand, there are some payroll providers, especially smaller payroll providers, that will run payroll, calculate all those taxes and withholdings, but they will leave that money in, and that will ideally show up as a payroll liability on your balance sheet. So it's money that you actually still keep the cash for all those payroll taxes, but you enjoy the use of that money until it needs to be sent in for your quarterly filings. So on the one hand, you get the benefit of all that cash while you're waiting to pay that. On the other hand, it can be a little confusing for many small business owners to have, this is potentially thousands of dollars of cash that they see sitting in their bank account that is already spoken for. So if that is the case and you do get the benefit of that, you need to be very careful at posting into your cash projection that you're going to have this payroll liability money that's going to have to be paid to the government when you do your quarterly filings, or when your payroll provider triggers those quarterly filings, so that you realize that yes, you can use that money right now, but that has already been spent and it's going to be needed when your taxes are due. Debt. So there's a few points I'd like to make on debt. The first is there are many small business owners that have a high credit card balance. They're paying a very high interest rate on that credit card balance. if you have excellent credit, you may be able to find a promotional credit card that offers a balance transfer where you could transfer that high interest credit card debt to a 0% or very low balance transfer promotion and save a good deal on your interest expenses over the course of that promotional period, whether it be at 6 months or even a year in some cases. That's probably only available to businesses, to owners that have very, very good credit. Can you refinance any of your existing loans for a lower payment? So you are just like you would when you refinance your house. Maybe you have a business loan. You are already, several years into that business loan. You might be able to refinance that for a new term of the same length or maybe even a longer length and spread those payments out over a much longer time and reduce the monthly cash outflow that's going for those payments. At the same time, we're at a historically low interest rates. You may be able to save a point or two on your interest rate for that loan. Again, additional savings. Can you get a loan payment deferral? So certain banks are offering loan deferrals for certain kinds of debt. So typically holders of commercial mortgages, if you have a mortgage on your building for your business, or even some other business loans, they might offer a 1 or 2 or 3 month loan deferral. And the terms of that deferral are going to vary, but some of those lenders may take those missed payments and spread those out over the balance of the remaining payments that you have in your loan term. So the loan term does not go any longer. It's just you're spreading those payments out that you're missing. Some banks will actually just add those just extend your loan term. So if you miss 2 or 3 months of payments, then your loan term just simply goes out 2 or 3 months. And then the last thing I like to say about debt, just because I've had a lot of conversations with folks that I think some entrepreneurs very instinctually, when they start to kind of buckle down and they have a large debt balance, maybe you owe a substantial amount of money on your credit card. Sometimes entrepreneurs feel like while they still have this money in the bank, they should go ahead and pay off that loan balance so then they don't have to worry about that monthly payment because they have cash now. So just go ahead and pay that off, they think to themselves, and then they won't have to worry about that monthly payment. Well, when we're in a position where we're trying to really extend our cash position for as long as possible, this is probably not the thing to do. We don't want to accelerate our debt payments right now. We want to stretch out our debt payments right now. So we don't want to take all of the cash that we do have or a substantial chunk of that cash and use that right now to pay off a debt balance that we aren't obligated to pay off right now. So where does this leave your business? So we put all these expenses in, all these outflows, all these inflows. We look at how this breaks down. We look at how we might adjust our payroll, and we look and see what month do we run out of cash. If it's not enough, then we have to make another pass. We're gonna have to make another round of cuts. And those things that we thought, yeah, I probably really need that for my business, we have to just take another look at that and see if, in fact, we really could survive without that thing for our business. And what this ultimately comes down to is trying to figure out the best of several very painful choices for our small business. So then I would also add that if cash is tight, if you maybe still have cash to make it at the end of the month as you look through this cash projection, but it's still a very low amount of cash, then you really might have to end up looking at this at almost a daily basis to adjust these inputs and outputs for your business. So this is just a living document that we're going to be in as long as you're in a position where the cash on hand of your business is low, especially if it's less than a month of your expenses for the upcoming month, then you really are going to have to pay a lot closer attention to this.